everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome for the first time. Today, we will recall the time where I'd wait in line to pick up lunch at a regular fast food restaurant and hear someone tell the person next to them or venting to an employee serving them that no one wants to work anymore. The shortage of staff at that restaurant comes to mind at once, and understandably, no one wants to spend all afternoon waiting to get their orders placed, but what they often forget is that these people counting your change and brewing your morning coffee need to make a living too, and they don't get paid enough to afford the cost of living. They're there because their schedules are flexible, they enjoy meeting new people, the job teaches them basic life skills, or maybe they're employed at that restaurant for a personal reason. Working in the service industry is not all bad if a happy customer thanks them for showing up and the associate loves their job. Sometimes it's not the entitled customers that might get their cynical coworker to wear the "I really wish I weren't here right now" badge from SpongeBob. The source of that annoyance could be coming from their managers. I was scrolling through Reddit while I was on break, and I came across this post in a Panera Bread subreddit that, in my opinion, partially explains why no one wants to work. So the person is an ex-employee that was let go from their job and was asking for advice regarding what next steps he should take. He posted 3 screenshots of an unpleasant exchange he had with his manager where he asked if it was alright for him to come in on a certain day, but he was not on the schedule because he had not completed the required training courses. So what reason is there to be upset? All he had to do is get it over with and then get to work afterwards, right? I apparently sat on deciding to make this video for too long because that post has been deleted, and if I didn't Google it the moment I found out, I wouldn't have any receipts to get us started. I owe this search engine one. Pardon the low quality of the screenshots too. The post deletion meant they were gone as well, and these are the only versions of the images I could find, but I typed a manuscript of these messages so they'll hopefully be more legible. The screenshots will just be there as evidence. Now let's check out the conversation. So the confrontation started when the ex-employee texted this message to his manager. "Hey dude, this is me. Since I'm not scheduled at all for the rest of this week and next week, would it be okay if I show up tomorrow from around 3 or 3:30 to 7 and Thursday from 1 to whenever?" His manager replied, "You cannot be scheduled until you have completed your basic training videos, so no, not until those are finished. You can come in and watch them, but we can't have you clocked in until they're done." I smell trouble. The ex-employee asked him, so I'd be getting no pay while watching them. I'd be asking him the same question if I were in his position. His manager then responded, "Unfortunately, yes, you've had several months to complete them." It led to the ex-employee to flat out state that he has to clock in to watch the videos. His manager replied, "You do not need to clock in to watch the videos. You can watch them online whenever." Giving this manager the benefit of the doubt, what he may have meant was that the ex-employee could have documented the time he started watching the training videos and the time he stopped so he can be paid later. If it were a remote position, I wouldn't see why this would be an issue, but at my current job, we're not allowed to watch any videos that cover training on our own time. I asked the store manager at the time about it when I was newly hired, and he told me no. When this Panera Bread manager was confronted about it, he dodged the accusation by not giving a clear answer that assured the ex-employee the hours he would have spent watching the videos would be accounted for. That's really shady. The ex-employee then responded, "I'm sorry, but that is illegal according to the Department of Labor." His manager replied, "Look man, you need to watch these videos or I cannot have you on the floor." Then why was he on the floor before this conversation was had? If you don't want to watch them, I can just let you go for having never completed your mandatory training. His message continues, "You have had months to finish these videos. I'm not paying you to mismanage your time. That's his problem, not the employee's. You can either get them done, or we gotta let you go." The ex-employee replied, "If that's the case, I'm going to resign and report you to Jobs and Family Services for attempting to make me work without pay." He then sent a screenshot of a PDF file that can be accessed on the Department of Labor's website, but the messages never went through. His manager continued with a third message. "I was very clear that the videos had to be completed or you wouldn't be scheduled. I'm not sure what you thought that meant." Now the ex-employee's text went through and he sent an additional message stating that the blurb in the screenshot is on the Department of Labor. His manager replied in an indifferent tone with this goodbye. "Have a good one. You had fair warning and chose not to fulfill your job requirements as set forth by your employer. We have every right to terminate you." The way he referred to himself in third person reminds me of a recording on an answering machine when someone doesn't pick up. Maybe he's reading off a script and texted it word for word because the shift in his tone came off as robotic. I emphasize that mandatory training must be completed within a certain time frame, and an employer is well within their rights to penalize someone and their staff for failing to pass it, but it's ultimately their responsibility to set aside time to arrange that because most employees don't have the credentials to do it themselves. In order for me to take an online training course, whether it's to learn about a revision to employee guidelines or refresh my memory on company policy, a manager would have to log into the computer. Then I'd enter my login info on the webpage where I can watch the videos. There's also a paradox in this conversation I picked up on where the manager told the ex-employee he needed to watch the training videos in order for him to be scheduled, but it started off with him stating that he wasn't scheduled for the rest of the week, which indicated that he was put to work immediately after being hired. It tells me the manager set aside no time whatsoever to get this ex-employee set up to learn basic training and just expected him to do it off the clock. That should not have happened since the ex-employee's training was directly related to his job title, so it had to be within normal working hours. The online videos covering the basics obviously weren't voluntary. They were indeed job-related, and he was put to work without having gone through that training. Essentially, what this manager had asked his ex-employee to complete has not met the criteria listed in the blurb. It is a cut-and-dry infraction based on the exchange in their text messages. Let's not mince words. Additionally, employee testimonies on Indeed stated that they were compensated for training, so I'm confused about why this guy in particular was told he couldn't be. This post went viral within hours, and multiple users on Reddit went on a frenzy when they noticed he wasn't actually fired, but rather resigned, as he stated. It led to a moderator putting a lock on the comments, but this ex-employee's account disappeared on the same day the post was taken down. It's sad to see him be placed in a fickle position and have a target placed on his back for talking about his situation. Comments that stated he handled the situation poorly and that he was acting entitled was the general consensus, and normally I'd semi-agree and just end this video with he should just look for another job because he didn't deserve it. He just shouldn't list that manager as a reference on his resume. But this exchange between the manager and the ex-employee, along with similar experiences from fast food workers, revealed that this is a bigger problem than just a disgruntled employee that walked out of the job because he refused to follow instructions. We're going to look at a few because I found them to be erroneous, and they're coming from people, even at a management level, that hardly respect low-level employees. If they end up having these kinds of people as their coworkers, that can quickly lead to distrust, and it diminishes productivity in the workplace. Here's a rage-inducing comment to start us off with. Why didn't you just watch the videos, man? Are they like 12 hours long or something? You could have just had them playing on your phone while you did other stuff. I think the bigger lesson to take away from this is that sometimes it's easier just to do the thing so you can make the money. This wasn't the fight worth fighting, in my opinion. It doesn't matter if it takes 12 minutes or 12 hours to complete the training. It's still time being put towards the company. 12 hours seems excessive for a typical associate, but it's not unheard of if they're learning how to operate dangerous equipment, in which case, training could take a couple days to complete. Bank tellers, another worker that deals with customers daily, would receive on-the-job training for a month, but at some banks, it can take up to a year to train them as a precaution to ensure they can be trusted to handle sensitive information. Honestly, I felt insulted when I read comments that suggest this ex-employee should have had the training videos play on his phone, and he can just do something else so it wouldn't seem like work. You're calling the ex-employee out for being lazy, yet you're advising him to be lazy and not pay attention to the vital details covered in his training, which reflects more of how you perceive fast food/retail workers, rather than how he quote-unquote poorly handled the situation. It's hypocritical because they're the most undervalued individuals in society, and calling them lazy draws out that perspective. This person commented, "Why didn't you not do them for months? They should have fired you a long time ago." From my experience in retail, it's not always easy for management to immediately set aside time to have me take a training course, especially if it's during a holiday season and they have bigger priorities to sort out. If they've hired a new associate, then absolutely, they must complete the online training before they're put to work. Afterwards, we're required to watch the videos again every so often. Experienced workers need a refresher on company policies too. Sometimes, however, such as when a friend from college was hired a few weeks ago, the management will have trouble looking up a new associate's name, and there could be technical issues that would hinder them from getting the training videos to open up. So the associate would be put to work while the issue would be looked into. In this scenario, nobody's at fault. It's just one of those things that come up. However, if my friend were given a tight 2-week or several-month deadline to watch the training videos and the issue still isn't resolved, he'd be let go over something that wouldn't be his fault. It wouldn't be fair for him. It's hard to tell if the ex-employee that posted about a situation on Reddit was newly hired. The manager texted that he had several months to watch the training videos, so why didn't he just get that out of the way from the beginning? If we're counting 3 or 4 months ago, from my understanding of the word several, that would be in the beginning of autumn. This ex-employee would have been hired when the holidays were around the corner and this Panera Bread location would be swamped with orders from customers traveling. As I said, this means that there wasn't time to arrange for him to complete basic training because he would be needed right away to help keep up with the long lines. It's clear that his failure to do so has been an issue since then, but the manager took the worst possible step to address it. This user that has not taken this into account commented, "You sound like a baby. Just get the shit over with. Now you get 0 pay and nobody gives a shit. Proud of yourself?" I do if that's any of your business. You must give a shit if you have the nerve to comment such trash. 5,700 people commented on that post, so they must give a shit. And for you to say that nobody does means you're more than likely delusional. But moving on. Several people commented that Panera Bread dodged a bullet and the text messages made this person sound like a nightmare employee. I can assure these snobbish users that a compensation dispute is the least of Panera's problems. They've been slammed with 3 separate lawsuits over the deaths of 2 customers and a permanent heart condition in a third, all allegedly caused by their newly released charged lemonade. Its caffeine content is higher than Red Bull and Monster energy drinks combined, and the locations that sold them never gave the victims a heads up about it. Panera panicked that they might have to pay hefty fines to their families, so much that they issued a consumer warning on the beverage section of its official website, and in some locations pulled the charged lemonade from its self-serve stations. One victim that died of a heart attack after drinking the lemonade, Sarah Cates, bought it under the impression that charged meant it contained electrolytes, a mineral used to make Gatorade. Sarah was diagnosed with long QT type 1 syndrome at age 5. Until her death, she was careful not to drink any beverages with high caffeine levels. To paraphrase it, she always kept a lookout for ingredients that could further disrupt her heart's electrical system. Sarah's roommate stated that she had no idea that Panera's charged lemonade contained caffeine, and had she had been given that heads up, she wouldn't have bought it. Why you're refusing to pay an individual employee to have him watch the videos required for his training pales in comparison to selling lemonade containing lethal dosages of caffeine. Both incidents are indications that Panera Bread can be backhanded. If you want a charged drink, Wawa's refreshers are a safer, tastier alternative. The FDA recommends that healthy adults should limit their caffeine consumption to 400 milligrams a day, and the refresher sold at Wawa contains 75 to 150 milligrams depending on the flavor. It's slightly higher than a cup of coffee, but much lower than Panera's charged lemonade. Lying about the beverage's caffeine content in its advertising is too fast of a bullet for them to dodge, and also, don't be snobbish. If there's anyone that dodged a bullet in this situation, it would be the ex-employee, as this person commented. If he listened to a quarter of the comments and get the training videos over with, knowing he wouldn't be compensated, who knows how far his manager would have been willing to go to exploit that. For instance, would he pressure him to work overtime with no additional pay? Would he have him come in on a day off, even if he was given advance notice that he had a commitment he couldn't miss, like, say, a doctor's appointment? Someone that actually did training unpaid stated that he wasn't aware that he was supposed to be compensated at the time he worked at McDonald's. This is a problem that's not tied down to Panera Bread, let alone that location, but it's known to occur in fast-paced workplaces where staff are dealing with both customers and food. I'm not saying every manager that runs a restaurant is this negligent, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that these workers, specifically those that are teenagers, frequently get the short end of the stick and aren't being treated fairly. This user that's employed in a similar environment commented, "They are both in the wrong as the way it's stated. There really isn't a case to be had here. It's safe to assume that OP had been working this whole time. If he had months to complete the videos, it means he had time during his work shift prior to being suspended to do it. The manager is in the wrong for not saying they had not been done after the first week, but we don't know what the hiring packet says or how it was worded. I can already tell their input is shallow. For example, my company handbook states that you have 2 weeks from your start date to complete any and all mandated training while on the clock. If you exceed that time, then it can be completed on your own time without compensation, and failure to do so will result in 2 weeks unpaid suspension. If still incomplete after that time, you will be terminated without notice. And before any Reddit warriors try biting my head off, it is completely legal and has been gone over by our company's lawyer as well as the NYS Department of Labor to be sure that it didn't violate any workers' rights." That comment makes no sense because they stated that both the manager and the ex-employee were at fault, yet they were mostly putting blame on the latter and have quoted their company handbook to justify the manager's decision to tell him, "I'm not paying you to learn the ropes. Tough." Sure, they said they were just using it as an example. I get it, but it's defective when applying it to the situation. The claim that the ex-employee had time during the shift to complete their training is not realistic in an environment like Panera Bread because, unless his manager can set aside time to get that set up, he couldn't just watch the videos whenever he wanted, especially when that location is busy and understaffed. The only mistake this user said this manager was at fault for was that he didn't realize that the ex-employee's training wasn't completed within the first week, when it was on them for keeping that in mind but having him on the floor anyway. That user's surface-level input made me wonder what company they're employed at and in what position. I had to ask. They're employed as a manager at a restaurant where they can refuse to pay their staff if they didn't complete their training within 2 weeks' time. Regarding that comment I came across, the department managers at my workplace could be reprimanded for clocking in employees that aren't scheduled to come in without approval, but never have I heard of one get fired over it unless it happened multiple times. These practices in such a toxic workplace like that restaurant is not only standard but legal in New York State. The evidence implying that in this situation an employee's rights were violated makes this comment all the more inconsistent. Putting a newly hired employee to work knowing they haven't watched the training videos was still a poor lapse of judgment for the manager at this Panera Bread location. You can argue that he intentionally put off the mandated training and kept telling them he'll do it at a later date, which again, he wouldn't have been allowed to do on his own time, but even then, that irresponsibility still lies with that manager since they could easily refuse to have him come in lest he completes the training. The only type of leniency I can think of is that this employee has watched the videos required for his training already, and that the information covered in the videos brought up in the screenshots of these text messages would be reiterated. Knowing that working at Panera Bread involves handling tools used for food prep, letting an untrained employee use them is a liability for the company. Granted, some experienced staff like a supervisor are willing to help newbies, but at a location where it can get frequently busy, there's often not enough time for them to do that, so you'd think it'd be wise for a general manager to arrange for a newly hired employee to watch the training videos so they'd be aware of what's expected of them as the face of the company. This person commented, "Ha ha! OP got Major Pikachu face all up in this thread." More like the manager at that location was acting like DW standing outside of Arthur's bedroom door stating that the keep out sign won't stop her because she can't read. It would be simple for me to claim that the manager is inexperienced, to be honest. Maybe they themselves have not received adequate training on how to discipline their staff, which begs the question, has this happened to another employee under their watch? Make of it what you will, but if I were the district manager and corporate notified me that a customer said something about this situation in their surveys, I would not be having it. The comments echoing the same sentiments. OP is entitled. He's a terrible employee. He's a lazy moron that needs to grow up. He should have watched the videos during those several months are rampant, but they don't add any substance to the discussion other than expressing the sheer back-asswards dislike toward a service worker that stood their ground. They're like Abraham Simpson yelling at a cloud. It's almost like how cashiers have to hold their tongue when talked down to because they're told to be courteous to everyone they work with. And sometimes that can escalate to violence in the workplace. I take it back. The surprised Pikachu face is how I feel about the dogpiling in that thread. The more I scroll through these comments, the more I realize that they state the ex-employee was in the wrong over and over again with no legitimate advice to give other than be obedient or be penniless. The same point about the repetition can be made about the users that argued that the ex-employee was in the right, but the difference is that their comments were more neutral. They worked with managers in the food industry that were just as awful, or working in human resources for different companies, or are customers that saw through these harmful comments and acknowledged that an associate bringing up their order deserves to be valued. One such comment stated, "Imagine going to a job and not getting trained on how to do anything, they still have you do the job and then bitch at you for not doing the training? You clowns in the comments make it sound like the manager allowed time during his shifts to do the training and he just decided not to. A bunch of bootlicking morons in the sub apparently. I'm sure it makes a bunch of losers wasting their careers at Panera feel good to shit on a 16-year-old that's being docked around. Oh, and you better believe that the manager is telling them they could do the training and the employee decided to just not do them at work, the manager would have said so in the messages. You've had several months to do them. It's obvious the manager hasn't actually given them time to do it and is taking out their own ineptitude on the employee, likely because their boss is mad about it. Absolute clown." The ex-employee is a sophomore in high school. I believe my opinion on the situation now is thinly veiled. That shouldn't be up for debate because forcing an underage employee to perform unpaid work is an infraction that can get a business fined. His manager could also lose his job, which would be morbidly karmic, and worst case scenario, taint Panera Bread's image as an establishment that prides itself on hospitality. I can't tell if that's the risk the manager is willing to take, but I can't imagine it ending well behind the scenes if it did get reported. I took a look at the ex-employee's profile before it was deleted, and I caught a glimpse of a report card he posted in another subreddit where he got mostly A's in business classes. Not counting extracurricular activities, I'm assuming, it's unlikely he could just make time to watch the training videos. Even for me as a young adult, 3 hours is a lot to put aside to do unpaid work. If I were him, I would have notified corporate or a union representative and looked for another job because regardless of how this kid acted, this doesn't feel ethical. How else was anyone on Reddit expecting him to react? Big surprise, employees at Panera Bread are not unionized. I can see why that moderator locked comments now because I feel like if I continue to scroll through them, I'm not going to shut up about low public opinion of individuals employed in customer service, and more than likely be meaner about it. Even from a project lead's perspective, the treatment this employee got was unacceptable and the situation must be taken as a cautionary tale for what could happen to those that applied for an entry-level job at a restaurant like Panera Bread. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you still disagree with how this kid responded to his manager, let me know how you would have handled this situation if that were you, and we can talk it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Godspeed. Go.